All right, so this week we're up to John chapter 7, and we're continuing on from where we were up to from last week, which is about verse 12, I think. So Jesus just started having a conversation where he's gone down to the festival in Jerusalem, and they've started asking him some questions. He's talked a little bit. He's mentioned that whole idea that they're looking to kill him. The people say, "You're mad. No one's looking to kill you." So then I think we're up to about verse 19. The people are amazed at his teaching as well. So from verse 19, did not Moses give you the law? Yet you all break the law. So we talked about that as well, didn't we?
I think we did.
Oh, here we go. Verse 25, I think, is where we're up to.
Okay. Yep.
At this, some of the people of Jerusalem began to say, "Is not this the man they want to put to death? And here he is, speaking openly, and they have not a word to say to him. Can it be that our rulers have actually decided that this is the Messiah? And yet we know where this man comes from. But when the Messiah appears, no one is to know where he comes from." Okay, so there's questions there again about Jesus and his identity and who the people think he is. Thereupon Jesus cried aloud as he taught in the temple, "No doubt you know me, no doubt you know where I come from, yet I have not come from my own accord. I was sent by the one who truly is, and him you do not know. I know him because I come from him, and he it is who sent me." At this they tried to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him because his appointed hour had not yet come. Yet among the people many believed in him. When the Messiah comes, they said, "Is it likely that he will perform more signs than this man?"
Yeah.
So again, he's sort of almost forcing things to a point where the people, obviously, they think they want to kill him and grab him because of those sorts of things that he's saying about himself. What is it that they were so offended about in what he was saying about himself there?
It's not the. It says the people of Jerusalem began to say, "Isn't this the man they want to put to death?" So the people themselves weren't really committed to killing Jesus. It was the priests and the Pharisees, which John labels as the Jews, but he means the rulers, the leaders, not the ordinary people, because it's very, very clear in this chapter, John is making it so obvious that people are just in a tither. They don't know who Jesus is. And you imagine it, if somebody like Jesus was living here in Quarry Hill and doing the things and saying the things that he was saying, and everybody listened instead of watching their televisions, of course there'd be huge discussion. And in spite of the Jews having already come to a conclusion that he's a blasphemer, we've got to get rid of him, he's dangerous, they'd already made up their minds, but the people hadn't.
Yeah.
And John makes that so clear here. You have them saying, like, even when they said, "We know," what is it?
No one will know where the Messiah comes from, but where he come from. Where's that idea come from? That no one's going to know.
That was from their tradition, because even later on in chapter 7, when somewhere there, I can't. After the last day of the festival, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm hearing this. Some of the people said, "This must certainly be the expected prophet." Others said, "This is the Messiah." Others again, "Surely the Messiah is not to come from Galilee. Doesn't Scripture say that the Messiah is to be of the family of David, from David's village of Bethlehem?" So John is showing that some people had hold of a tradition that nobody would know where the Messiah came from, while others knew the Scripture that Luke refers to, the men that King Herod asked, the wise men, the sages, and they were the biblical scholars, and they knew the prophecy that the Messiah should come from Bethlehem. So that confusion is clearly there in the background amongst the people. And some are deciding for and some are deciding against. Some are siding with Jesus and others with the leaders, with the chief priests and the and the Pharisees, the Pharisee party.
So he grabs onto this thought in verse 28 and cries out aloud at the temple, no doubt you know me, no doubt you know where I come from, yet I have not come from my own accord. I was sent by the one who truly is, and him you do not know. I know him because I come from him, and he it is who sent me. So once again, this is obviously blasphemy in their eyes because he's identifying himself and where he comes from so closely with the one, capital O1, as in God himself. What's at the heart of what he's saying there?
It talked about he went up to the temple and taught, and everyone was astonished and attracted because he was saying new things, and he wasn't saying the new things in a way like the rabbis just repeating their masters and so on, the traditions passed on through the scholars of Israel, but he was saying new things that rang true, and he made it clear. He said, look, this isn't my teaching. I'm just like your rabbis. I'm following the one who sent me and saying what he has shown me, what he has taught me. He said this over and over again. I really do wish that John had sat down and clearly said just exactly what Jesus did say up there in the temple. Wouldn't you love to have the notes of somebody took while he was speaking up there, exactly what he was saying? I was thinking about this last week, and it occurred to me, you know, in the chapters leading up to chapter 7, John has given us a pretty good insight into what Jesus did say. Chapter 3, what he said to Nicodemus, that there's a new thing happening, and to be part of it, you've got to be born again. And to the woman from Samaria that he met on the way back up to Galilee, he told her that he was the Christ and taught about the kind of worshippers that God wants. And in chapter 5, the whole topic that he was talking about there is the relationship between the Son and God, who he was as the Son of God, talking about his identity. And then chapter 6 is that event up in Galilee where he fed the people. He was teaching again about the relationship between God and mankind, and that he as the Christ, or the Son of Man, had come to be the new manna, the new food from heaven, the new provision by God for their desperate hunger and their perishing thirst. But, they needed to eat and to drink, which really meant putting their trust totally in him. That comes before chapter 6 when he talked about so first of all, he's talking about his identity as the Son of God. But in chapter 6, it's how the Son of Man is to provide for the needs of the human race, to bring about their salvation. So all of that probably was John letting us know the kind of things that Jesus taught. But here in this passage, he's very clearly claiming and affirming that he is from God.
Yeah,
that he is Son of God. It's this particular passage is affirming again to the Jews that he was Son of God, sent by God to be the Saviour of the world.
but also affirming that they don't know God.
Well, I think that's what upset them. They weren't thinking about him as a blasphemer at that point. He's a teacher who's gone too far, even if he's been saying good things. To say that we don't know God, and here we are in the temple worshipping at the Feast of Tabernacles. All the sacrifices have been going on the whole week, all this ritual and so on. And here you say we don't even know him.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's offensive.
Yeah, they're upset, and probably, unless you really fully understood and believed, you would be upset. Who is he to make these claims about himself? You know.
And part of his
I know God, and you don't know him at all.
yeah, and part of his argument is that if they actually recognized him, then that would show that they knew God.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they can't see how he could be from God because it just doesn't fit into their view of the world.
And not so much that it didn't fit, but that they weren't prepared to allow their view of the world to be enlarged.
Yeah.
And I think that spells out what's going on with us, you know. The education system that our governments have set up are convincing people that there's nothing other than this physical world that science investigates, the time and space and matter, and that there is nothing else. And they won't let anybody come on their territory to say, you're wrong. There is something else. There's a whole metaphysical world that has been known about and discussed, and best thing of all, that has been revealed to us by God acting in our history through the Son of God who became the Son of Man, you know?
Yeah.
Doggone.
Well, and that science, I was reading, watching a little podcast about a guy, Stephen Meyer, I think it is, who wrote, talks about intelligent design. And he's sort of pointing out that science came out of that sort of 13th to 17th century Europe, where the presuppositions of the Judeo-Christian thinking was the only way that science could have come about.
And why it didn't come about in Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism or anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Because the presuppositions weren't there.
Yeah.
Like Rodney Stark says, the meditation that was practiced in Hinduism, kind of looking at your inner self and trying to find meaning in your existence, he said you could meditate on that sort of thing forever and never come up with the idea of this physical world outside here being analysed and turned to our advantage.
Yeah. And he points out that he mentions a bit about the Greeks and how their thinking, they love to philosophize about things and think about what the ideal thing was, but they never went out and tested it.
Yeah.
So they had this idea that the perfect expression of physical motion was a circle.
Mm.
So they assumed that all of the planets just went around the sun in a perfect circle because that's what their kind of ideas and their philosophizing led them to. But they never actually went out and tested it. And it wasn't until the sort of like the 13th, 14th, 15th century that people actually put that sort of stuff to the test, because they knew that the world was a certain way and they had to discover the way that God had made the world. And that's what their endeavor was.
Yeah.
And the way that you discover the world is you go and observe and you test, and you have a mind which is made in the image of God, and that mind is able to comprehend the way the world is made. And so it's all those things going together. And then they were also skeptical about that idea of original sin, that humans have a tendency to over-exaggerate and not be thorough. And so you've got to make sure you test things thoroughly, and that's how sort of the empirical method came about. Anyway, that's sort of what I'm thinking about.
And worth saying that Copernicus, who discovered the elliptical movement of the stars, of the planets, was a priest.
Yeah. Well, he also quotes this beautiful Isaac Newton in his key work about gravity. It's like it's an amazing sort of analysis, and his ideas are incredible and all backed up by sort of empirical evidence and lots of research. But at the end of it, he has this amazing sort of theological reflection talking about the incredibleness of God and the way he made things. And yeah, so it's like we've separated science and then you can have belief and theology. But for someone like Isaac Newton, it was all tied up together.
And it should be for us too.
It did naturally for him. Yeah, it
Yeah.
should be for us as well.
Actually, I had a sort of an epiphany after I went for a run on Monday, I think it was, and I was sitting on our back veranda enjoying the warmth of the sun just while I was cooling down, and it suddenly occurred to me how amazing it is that there is that thermonuclear reaction going on. I don't know how many million kilometers away, and my little patch of skin sitting here on my back veranda feels the warmth of it.
Mm.
And I was just thinking how wonderful God had made things that, like, you know, any nearer and we would be burnt up, and any further away it wouldn't reach us, the heat from the sun.
Yeah.
And then a drop of condensation fell from the roof onto my leg. And that whole thought, you know, that little drop of water has fallen to the earth and hit my leg, and this earth is like a drop of water, and if it wasn't circling around the sun, we'd be drawn into the sun by the same force that brought that drop of moisture onto my leg.
Yeah.
Just sitting there, I was staggered, and just, you know, like when you're choked up and you can't say something because your emotions are in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, just that wonder of God's creation.
Yeah. And I think a wonder, and then that leads to a curiosity. And the curiosity obviously has led lots of men and women over history to want to go and find out. But I think they had to get to a point where they moved beyond this idea that it was sort of God was doing all these miraculous things to explain how things happen, but that things are happening all the time that you can discover, and there's sort of laws and rules that govern them.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of stable sort of thinking that made science possible.
Yeah. And there's that connection that God made things logic, rationally, or somehow or other, so that they work, and then he made us in his image so that we can appreciate the way that he's made them.
Yeah.
Just that kind of harmony with the reason that is between the reason that's in our minds and the reason that put everything together in the first place, which is God.
Hmm. So going back to this,
And then, yeah, the fact that Jesus could say, I know him because I came forth from him and he sent me. How much more personal can you get? A man saying that about his relationship with this creator we've been talking about.
yeah. And so some people do believe in him. Is it likely to say when the Messiah comes, is it likely that he'll perform more signs than this man? And then the Pharisees are overhearing all of this. So the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple police to arrest him. Then Jesus said, for a little longer I shall be with you, then I'm going away to him who sent me. You will look for me, but you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come. So the Jews said to one another, where does he intend to go, that we should not be able to find him? Will he go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? What did he mean by saying, you will look for me, but you will not find me? Where I am, you cannot come. So again, he's saying things that are just puzzling to them, and they can't really work out, and which don't really become clear until after his death and resurrection. And obviously, John is reflecting on those things there as he writes them. He's probably seeing so much more clearly from hindsight what Jesus was actually saying when he was making these sorts of statements.
Yeah, I wonder if Jesus knew that the temple police were standing in the crowd, sent from the Jews, sent from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and that they were wanting to arrest him and take him away and kill him, just like they'd been planning for months, years, probably. If he did, then he's probably sort of giving a hint to them, look, I am going to die and go away to the Father who sent me. I'm going to be here till I finish the job that I've been given to do. And so it might have been a message to take back to the chief priests and the Pharisees that, well, he knows that this Jesus knows that he's only going to be here a little while longer and then he's going to be killed. But they didn't understand him. And I think the bit that really puzzled them, they repeated it. What did he mean by saying, you'll look for me, but you will not find me? Where I am, you cannot come. He just said that he came from the Father, and he said that he is going back to the one who sent me. I'm going away to him who sent me. He's kind of rounding off the claims that he's made. I've come from God. I'm going to go back to God. I'm not going to be here physically much longer. And I think the key thing in there, he says, not where I will be, you cannot come, but he says, where I am, you cannot come. So right at that moment, he's claiming to be in the presence of God.
Yeah.
The physical part of him is going to be stop living for a little while, then come back to life again. But who he really is in his essence is who he is right now with God. And he's saying, and where I am, you cannot come. Not in your present state of mind, not unless you allow your worldview to be expanded to realize that you're having a visit from God. Man, wake up. This is the reality that you're staring at. I'm welcoming you if you will only come. Just come.
Is that sort of I am that he's using for when he says, where I am, you cannot come?
I think John is very clearly hinting, once again, the deity of Jesus Christ, that Jesus was God. No doubt at all. That's what I think.
So it's the I am statement that's like the I am, like Yahweh almost.
Yeah, yeah. Well, exactly. Not almost.
It is.
There's another thing there too. Where does he intend to go? So they don't get the message that he's looking at his death. Where does he intend to go that we should not be able to find him? Will he go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? That was the best they could think of, that he was going to just do an exit, get out of Israel, escape from the chief priests and the Jews, and the only way to do that would be to emigrate, to live out amongst the Greeks. And then they add, and teach the Greeks, which is a reference back to the fact that he'd been saying these marvelous things and they had been really impressed. And now they're saying, will he teach all of this to the Greeks? And I can't help but think that John's kind of got his tongue in his cheek, because this is exactly what John did.
Yeah.
In Galatians, when Peter and James and John met with Paul and Barnabas, they finally settled on the idea that Paul and Barnabas would go to the Gentiles.
Yep.
And that Peter and John would go to the dispersion. which in history, that's exactly what John did. He went to Ephesus, where the synagogue was obviously full of people who'd been started to believe in Jesus. And tradition says, the history says that he lived there till he died and that he was buried there. And that's what he did. He taught the Greeks what Jesus had taught Israel, and which he had learned by sitting there in the circle as Jesus taught. Lovely.
Yeah, so it's a little bit prophetic.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's probably best we don't start a new section at the moment. Just finish off from there. I suppose part of that identity that Jesus is revealing there, that I am, obviously goes back to the start of the book and to that prologue. And all of these stories, just trying to think, why does John keep emphasizing all of these stories over and over again, one after the other? He's building up the argument and laying out the evidence just so clearly over and over again that this is who Jesus was claiming that he was, and this is the response of the people. Seems like we're going through the same thing again and again and again as we're reading John. Is it so that we get it?
Well, I think all the time to realize who Jesus is, it takes an enormous effort, I guess from our side. That was certainly true of the disciples and the people of Israel. Just so difficult to get your head around who Jesus is and what he does for us in our salvation. But again, it comes back to what Jesus said, what John wrote at the end. There are many other things that Jesus did not recorded in this book, but these are recorded so that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name.
Yeah.
John is, his whole effort is to get us, to draw us into what he was experiencing himself.
Yeah, it goes back to what he said at the start as well, to those who did believe, who gave the right to be called the sons and daughters of the God. Yeah. So it's the effort to record these stories and make it clear who Jesus is, and then for people to respond to that.
And how to respond.
Yep.
That's it.
So to respond by not doubting like the teachers of the law and the Pharisees did, but by believing.
Yeah, it's not just by believing. You can believe and not really believe. It's expanding your perception of reality. It's allowing the spiritual part of you to grow to the dimension that it was always meant to be, which is to see the real world, which is more than just this physical world. It's the world where it's sort of natural for us to get up in the morning and just simply thank God for the life that we've got. And it's natural for us to see that there's so much more that we haven't yet experienced that's promised to us. And to be convinced that this larger reality is the real deal, and to live that way.
Yep. And to live out of that reality so clearly and strongly that it shapes all that we do.
All that we do and all that we think. That's where it starts.
Yep. All right. Well, let's do it.
And we keep almost getting there and then failing, almost getting there again and failing. And it's getting better as time goes, as each one of us lives it. It's easier.
Yep.
But it's still the reality is going to break in on us one of these days, either with Jesus coming back or by us dying.
Yeah.
The greatest adventure of all.
Yeah, that'll be good.
There you go.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thanks, Lucas.
See you next week.
Probably see you up at the living room.
Yeah, see you there.